Good evening, race fans, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Push to Pass podcast. As always, I am Derik Vance, your host, and what a great show that we have in store for you this evening. Obviously, we're going to go through and recap the Honda Indy Toronto race that took place just this past weekend. As well, we will preview the one and only doubleheader taking place this weekend at the Iowa Motor Speedway as well. Also in the show this evening, we're going to be joined by Jake Query of the Query and Schultz, and then he is also one of the announcers, many announcers, as Mark James alluded to in an earlier show on the IndyCar radio network. So can't wait to hear from Jake. And then, as always, before we close out tonight's show, we're going to hear from Mike of BetIndyCar to see how he did last week there at Toronto, and then looking forward this weekend to the doubleheader that is the Iowa Speedway. But before we get into anything, obviously, we do need to preview we need to recap what was the Honda Indy Toronto last weekend. And as you see behind me, Scott Dixon said drought. What drought? Scott Dixon on Sunday broke into victory lane for the first time this year, the fourth time in his career at Toronto, and then also moving ever so closely to the all-time wins record, which on Sunday he tied the great Mario Andretti for second all-time in IndyCar wins with 52. The six-time champion overtook pole sitter Colton Herta and then never looked back in the contact-filled contest last Sunday. As I mentioned, Dixon did earn his first victory since May 2001 at the Texas Motor Speedway, which is a span of 23 races. Keep in mind that is the second longest winless streak of his illustrious career. Also, too, by capturing the Honda Indy Toronto on Sunday, by capturing the Honda Indy Toronto on Sunday. Also, too, Dixon drove his number 9 PNC Bank Chip Ganassi Racing Honda to victory lane by just 0.81 seconds over pole sitter Colton Herta, in his number 26 Gainbridge Honda. For the majority of the race, Dixon closely followed Herta in the opening stages of the 85-lap race, and then picked his mark to strike and pounced after pitting one lap before Herta did. Slightly slowed in the pit lane, Herta emerged on cold tires and watched Dixon as Dixon sailed by him heading into turn number 1. The battle for the win was all but settled after the first round of pit stops as the New Zealander built, lost, and regained a lead of 2 seconds or more over Herta during multiple caution flags on Sunday. Also, too, the victory also was, as I said, Dixon's 52nd of his career, and as I mentioned, tying him with the legendary Mario Andretti for number 2 all-time on the NTT IndyCar Series win list. Just ahead of them, AJ Foyt sits with 67 wins. Also noted as well, this was Scott Dixon's 4th career Toronto victory, extending his streak to 18 consecutive NTT IndyCar Series seasons with at least one victory. And he has also won a race in a record 20 seasons overall. Before we get to the results from Sunday's race, let's hear from some of the drivers that took part in the Honda Indy Toronto race this past Sunday.
Not a bad end. Unfortunately we had a bit of damage overtaking another car on the straight, and unfortunately they just moved a little bit and I caught the front wing on their rear tyre. After that, I think we were a lap down, managed to come back, putting in some great laps and some good moves to get back to P14. Almost got Renas for P13, but yeah, we had a good car, great speed. it's kind of a bittersweet because it was a great drive, but there was a lot more probably out of it in the result if we didn't have that incident at the beginning. So big thanks to the team. I think we had a good car this weekend. Definitely one of the faster ones. Good result. So thanks to the team. Thanks Team Chevy.
Awesome recovery today. Finished P7. Well, great race. Amazing strategy from the stand, Mike Shank, and obviously, I'm so proud of the whole team for great pit stops. Toronto is usually madness, and I feel like we extracted the best out of what we could do today. P7 in the end with a great race car, and I feel the momentum of the team. So very excited for the races that are coming up. We have races every weekend, the next 3. So we are looking to be doing very well in Iowa next week. We started well, conservative, lost field positions, gained field positions. It was kind of like insane. And then the strategy start playing in. People start pitting early. We got stuck a little bit on one of the cars, but as soon as they clear left, boom, we went for it. And on the pit exchange, sounds like we came back on the same place, which is a shame because the car was actually decent enough. Banner was me in between Will, kind of like a little rivalry from back then, and it just wasn't making it easy. So, yep, and then we lost a couple of spots over there because of that. The rear started going away, but the car is decent. In the end of the day, we did have a good pace, but it wasn't for us. At least Simon showed that what the car can do, finishing the top 10, which is great. So now let's go for the next for Iowa.
Unfortunate finish to the day. We just had too much damage with contact late in the race to continue on, but I really felt like we were setting up for a nice finish, had a great strategy. Unfortunately, I had a speeding violation early in the race that kind of put us in the back, but still then hanging on and in the group racing, having some fun, and just kind of got caught up in a street racing incident and too much damage and had to retire the car.
All right, we just finished the race here, and I survived no blisters this time. That was kind of my main worry going into it, but there was thankfully a good amount of yellows, and I think it stopped the blisters from forming. But overall, I was very happy with how the race went. We managed to do a very early undercut, and I was pushing like crazy on the second stint on the primaries, and we managed to gain a few positions, and then we really had to do a massive fuel save and tire save to make that long stint, that middle stint, and I think it went very well. We did lose a few positions here and there, but I did learn a lot on how to judge when the car's going to make a move from behind me and how to get on that button. But overall, I learned a lot, and once again, I think it was a good gain. It's just unfortunate on that last pit stop when it was all chaotic. We managed to make a bit of a mistake on our part, so we lost a few positions there. But overall, I mean, again, we learned a lot. I feel like just this one race, I matured probably another 20 years of my life. So thank you to the whole team. I will see you guys at Iowa.
Huge thank you to all of those fellow drivers that were able to give us here on Push to Pass a little bit of insight as to what they were seeing, what they were feeling at during the race rather this past Sunday. Taking a look at the results here real quick, and then we'll get into what the points and how they shook out after this race in Toronto. Again, Scott Dixon was your race winner, followed by Colton Herta, Felix Rosenquist. Great run for Graham Rahal, finishing in the top 5. Indy 500 champion Marcus Ericsson rounded out the top 5. And then you had Alex Palou. What a whirlwind he's been in the last few weeks. Simon Pagenaud, who you heard from as well. The highest finishing rookie was Christian Lundgaard at number 8. Number 9, Scott McLaughlin. And then rounding out the top 10 was Joseph Newgarden. In 11, Pato Award. David Malukas followed him in 12th, as you just heard from. Renus VK in 13th. Callum Ilott in 14th. Will Power just couldn't find his groove this week and finishing in 15th. Roman Grosjean was 16th. Elio Castroneves was 17th. Delvin DeFrancesca was 18th. Jack Harvey was 19th. And Connor Daly rounded out the top 20. 21st, Jimmy Johnson. 22nd, Kyle Kirkwood. 23rd, Alexander Rossi. 24th, Dalton Kellett. And then the first car to retire, finishing 25th, was Takuma Sato. So taking a look to see how the points finished out after the Honda Indy Toronto, as you see up on your screen. Marcus Ericsson in first place, 351 points. Second, Will Power, 316 points. Alex Palou, third with 314 points. Joseph Newgarden with 307 points. Fifth, Scott Dixon, 307 points as well. Sixth, Pato Award with 276 points. Seventh, Scott McLaughlin, 274 points. 8, Colton Herta, 254 points. 9th, Felix Rosenquist, 244 points. And then rounding out the top 10, Simon Pagenaud with 243 points. As you see up there in the top right corner, in the rookie standings, leading all rookies right now is the number 30 car, Christian Lundgaard, driver of the Ray Hall Letterman Lanigan Racing Honda, with 183 points. So that is how things have shooken out, rather, after the Toronto race, and going to be quite exciting to see now as we move ahead to Iowa. And like I mentioned at the beginning of the show there, this is the one and only time that we are going to have a double weekend there at the Iowa Speedway, rather, and we'll be previewing that here momentarily. Obviously, we're going to have Jake Creary join us, announcer of the IndyCar Radio Network. He's going to stop by here momentarily and have a little bit of a discussion, and I'm sure that'll be one of many things that we're going to bring up this evening. So just waiting for him to stop by. We'll give a little bit of a breakdown of Iowa while we wait on Jake to join us. The NTT IndyCar Series does move into the Hawkeye State, as I mentioned, for a rare doubleheader weekend at the Iowa Speedway for the not one but two races this weekend. The HyveeDeals.com 250 presented by DoorDash on Saturday. And then on Sunday, the Hy-Vee Salute to Farmers 300 presented by Google. And as I mentioned, that is July 23rd and 24th. There are 26 drivers who have entered both races this weekend. They look to conquer the 7-8 mile or 0.894 mile oval with 250 laps on Saturday and 300 laps on Sunday. So we will get back into the Iowa preview as we move along. But I do see that our first guest of today has joined us. You can catch this gentleman, huge local radio following here in Indianapolis. Also co-host with Derik Schultz of the Query and Schultz show daily. I know we'll probably talk about that as the show rolls on. And then also to one of the many announcers that makes it possible for the IndyCar Radio Network to do the amazing work that they do week in and week out. Jake Query is joining us. And Jake, first and foremost, let me say a huge thank you for taking a little bit of time out of your busy schedule. I know, the next couple of weeks are definitely going to be busy for you and for the rest of the crew. So a huge thank you for taking time out of your day to join us. For people that don't know you, and that's a shame that they don't, give us a little bit of insight as to what it's like being Jake Creary.
I've never been asked it that way. I appreciate it. Hopefully you can hear me okay. I know the lighting's not the greatest here. I've never been a TV guru in terms of setting stuff up. But listen, Derik, it's a pleasure to be here. In terms of what life is like for me, I'm a couple of months from 50 years old. Listen, I enjoy the privilege of being able to call IndyCar races and travel with the series and go and watch the races and be able to try to bring them for those that are not there that want to be able to listen to the race. And the interest in the sport itself and in what we do on the radio network, to me, is not lost on me, how grateful I am. And, I know it's a privilege to be able to go to the races, to call them. It's something that as a kid growing up in Indianapolis, I always dreamed of being on the Indy 500 broadcast. I never thought that would parlay into, over 225 races now in my career in terms of the totality of the season. And then I do a morning radio show here in Indy talking about all sports, and excluding the fact that it's the first time since I was a senior at North Central High School 31 years ago that I've been up before 7 o'clock in the morning, which I had to get used to when I got the job in November. But excluding that, man, I'm very lucky. I know I'm lucky, and I'm going to ride it out for as long as I can.
Yeah, you touched on, being a part of the IndyCar radio network, and as long as you've done that, I've had your boss and coworker, Mark James, on, and he was discussing the integral how everything works. And I was just so blown away. And I complimented not only him, but you and everyone else, just for the simple fact that, as you mentioned, all you're trying to do is, paint a picture for people that, can't make it to the race, and what you're seeing. And you, Mark, and everyone else, like I told him, do such an amazing job. And sometimes when I can't make it, my coverage is based on what you guys are seeing, what you guys are talking about. So you are definitely a huge asset. And I hope that you definitely get recognized from track to track where you guys go.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, listen, we are guys that, like we're getting ready for Iowa, obviously. We're all traveling. We're all going to be there. And so we've already made our plans of, hey, what do we want to do when we're not at the racetrack? Because we all get along. I mean, I think that's the key. And hopefully that comes off in our broadcasts. We are nothing more than just a group of guys that are buddies with one another, that are enjoying weekends in the summertime together at great, energies and great venues to be able to watch racing. And then that kind of, hopefully carries over into the broadcast, into a natural enthusiasm and energy, and making it sound exciting for the listeners, and also giving them the information that's necessary. I think, my job's easy. The guys in the pits, everybody from, at times, Nick Yeoman and I rotate in the pits, and then Michael Young's in the pits at times, Alex Wolf, Ryan Marine, Joel Sebastianelli, Dan Ruzanowski at times. We've got a wide array of guys that do this, Rob Blackman. Those guys have the real job, because they've got to relay information quickly. They've got to do it in a matter of 8 to 10 seconds, the same amount of time it takes to get, the fuel and the tires on the car. And they've also got to be able to acquire that information, and oftentimes talk to drivers when drivers don't want to be talked to after an incident on track. So it all comes together, hopefully, for a good broadcast, and one that not only informs people what's going on, but gives them the energy and the excitement of what we're watching.
Yeah, you guys, like I said, I don't know if I can, obviously put into exact words the work that you guys put in, and you just make it seem like it's so easy. But talking to Mark, it just seems like it's chaos is what it seems like at times.
I guess it's an organized chaos, but I'll be honest with you. I can't speak for Mark. I can't speak for Nick or for Michael or Chris Denari, the guys that I do the turns with in Indy. But to me, it is easy. To me, it's the easiest job in the world, because I'm having fun. I'm with guys I trust, that I know. The only hard part is to make sure that my eyes are communicating with my mouth what I'm seeing. And if something goes totally awry on the racetrack, that I don't use a profanity, knock on wood. But other than that, to me, it's a really easy job. The hardest part is getting there, making sure that we're there in time and in position. And then after that, it's a matter of, it's no different than watching a race with your buddies. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Let's first get into Toronto this past weekend. I know it's been a few years since IndyCar was up there, so only a handful of drivers, obviously, going into to first practice, had an idea as to what Toronto was going to bring. What did you see, and tell us a little bit about what you thought of that race on Sunday?
Well, one of the interesting things to me, Derek, about Toronto was the fact that, and I hate to say it this way, because this is the time of year, usually around Mid-Ohio, is when Scott Dixon really starts to get into groove, right? And we were coming off of Mid-Ohio, and obviously he's been very good this year. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's not like he's been off the map or off the radar, but, there is a part of me, and this is not a knock on Scott Dixon at all. As a matter of fact, I guess it's a credit to him that I'm almost embarrassed or have to give a disclaimer to saying this, but there was a part of me that started to wonder, okay, is Father Time finally catching up to Scott Dixon? Are we going to go a year here without seeing him win a race? And then, of course, what happens? But he gets the win in Toronto, and now he puts himself back in position to get into groove. So, and he did it in typical Scott Dixon fashion, right? I mean, he qualified well, but, he waited until there was an opportunity to get himself up towards the front, and then he and Mike, he and the guys come up with a great strategy. And are able to just maintain up towards the front. As a matter of fact, really kind of pull away. I mean, some cautions bunch things up a little bit. But I thought he was, obviously really impressive. Outside of that, the other storyline I think for the weekend, aside from the obvious Alex Palou storyline, is that of their teammate, Marcus Ericsson, because Ericsson, he put himself in great position with the double points race at Indy to get that points lead. And Derek, let's be real, man. I mean, Will Power said it at the beginning of the year. Look, you stockpile a bunch of top fives, you can win yourself a championship. That's exactly what Ericsson's doing. I mean, he may not be blowing you away from race to race, but he's consistent. He's up towards the front. And I think his ability to know kind of when to go and when to lay back and just bring it home safely and inside like the top 8 is going to serve him well. And look, he's not relinquishing that points lead.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. First, going back to your point about Scott Dixon, obviously, if it wasn't for one hiccup, we're talking Scott Dixon being again another Indianapolis 500 winner. That's how close he was. But I think you're absolutely right talking about going into the second half of the year. Bringing that story up is Scott Dixon, is Father Time, like you said, catching up with him, and I'm guilty of that myself. We're rowing the same boat there. I thought the same thing. I said, if it's not now, then when is it? And as you said, Scott Dixon comes out and does what Scott Dixon does. Qualifies well, and then just cruises. It seems like after that pit stop there, that he overtook the lead from Colton Herta, which credit to Colton Herta. He had one of the best cars. He absolutely did. But Scott Dixon did what Scott Dixon does, and then ties the great Mario Andretti. Let's not forget that the all-time list, second with 52. He's still got a little bit of ways to go yet to catch AJ Foyt, but you know what? Yeah, at this point, you can't put it past Scott Dixon. And then you talk about Marcus Ericsson. You want to talk about somebody that may be playing the underdog card, because when you talk about top drivers in IndyCar right now, I'm sorry, but Marcus Ericsson's name is just not being thrown around.
Oh, no question. And that's what I mean. I mean, and it's, not unlike Derek, let's be real, not unlike Palou a year ago, right? I mean, Alex Palou was relatively, I hate to say unknown, because I remember Alex Palou's first year when he was with Dale Coyne. And I asked another driver, I said, I'm going to sound crazy here, but I think this Alex Palou guy's pretty good. And I don't know anything about it. I mean, you know what I mean? I don't. And they were back and no. Yeah, Palou is very highly thought of. And then it comes together for him. And even in last year, I remember people were kind of waiting for when he was going to wilt right down the stretch and when the pressure was going to get to him. And he was never caught up in that moment. And that feels like Marcus Ericsson, right? I mean, I know that Ericsson obviously comes from the background of Formula One, so people knew who he was. But in terms of the IndyCar competitiveness and being up front, it's interesting this year for the 500. And I've shared this story a couple of times, but when I'm up in the turns, and I call turn 3 for the radio network for the 500, and the way I do it is I just have a legal pad and I write down 1 through 8. And I occasionally, every 15 or 20 laps, when I think of it, I write down the top 8 to remind myself who's running in the top 8. And then that way on restarts or things like that, if I look down the straightaway and I see somebody pop out of line, I can look at it in my eye and go, okay, that's 6th car back, running 6th is, whoever, right? Like Palou, whatever it might be. And I went back after the race and I was looking at that. And I think I'd written down the top 8 18 times at different points in the race. And of the 18 times that I wrote down the top 8, Marcus Ericsson was on all 18 sheets. I think he was the only one that was, actually. And Elio was that way last year. So my point being, he just ran the Indy 500 kind of encapsulated right now his year, right? And the fact that he just was there the whole day and kind of let stuff come around and move up and slide down beside him. But in the end, he never wavered and he was right there. And I think that in terms of this points championship, he may well be like that. I mean, we might see, at one point it was Pato, and, now maybe it's, Newgarden or Power. They're going to be right up there with him, and maybe they'll fluctuate around a little bit, but he's managed to keep himself right there in that front pack, and he's got a good advantage because of that double points race. So long as attrition doesn't bite him, if he continues to do what he has been doing, he's going to be hard to beat.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And one final point on Ericsson, it just come to my mind. He has the points lead, obviously, going into Iowa this weekend. And you want to have, you talk about having experience to bounce off in the stretch that he's going to have here to try to hold on towards the end of the year with not only, reigning, pit winner Alex Palou, but then you have Scott Dixon in your corner as well. I can't think of two better guys to have that are going to, I can talk to down the stretch, being
Correct.
the points leader.
Or two guys that, and listen, they're probably both going to be right there in the points championship with them. But so long, if it's Power and Newgarden, for example, that are the guys chasing him down the home stretch, Ericsson's got the points lead. You know darn well that Palou and Dixon are going to be up there towards the front in races, and they serve as pretty nice buffers, right? To even, hey, get in front of Power and slide him from finishing third to fourth in this race, or fourth. Every point's critical. And to have those guys, if they're not mathematically in it, which they may well be, but if they are not, to have those guys in the final race working as a buffer for you, huge advantage.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So it's definitely going to be interesting to watch down the stretch the games that are going to be played between both Team Penske and Chip Ganassi Racing respectively. You did touch on Alex Palou, and I can't go without bringing this up. What a whirlwind last 2 weeks Alex Palou has had. I know news comes out of basically nowhere about a week or so ago. What do you sense? What are you getting? I know you have some inside sources, but what's your take on what Alex what's happening?
When I saw it all, Derek, come down with Alex Palou, I mean, I, like everybody else, was I initially got the email from Ganassi Racing that Palou was retained, and of course, my first thought was, well, of course. I mean, why wouldn't they pick up his option? And then later that night, I was out running an errand, and I'm scrolling through my phone, and I'm like, wait, what is this? And I read what Palou said. My first initial reaction was that Ganassi Racing got wind of the fact that Alex Palou was talking to another team. And that as a result of that, they went ahead and publicly came out to say that they'd picked up his option, kind of as a first strike or a line in the sand, so to speak. And I think one of two things took place here. And initially, what I thought absolute with certainty took place was that Chip Ganassi realized that Alex Palou probably had a weird language in his contract that exercised an out, and that he exercised that out and was leaving to go to Arrow McLaren SP. But then, of course, you have that weird nuance. The tweet didn't come from Arrow McLaren SP. It came from McLaren F1. Same team, different umbrellas. Now, initially, what I assumed was that Chip, who's a very savvy businessman, very savvy, I should say, businessman. My assumption was that Chip Ganassi saw that this was coming down the pike and thought, you know what, we're going to go ahead and put this line in the sand so that if he wants to go to McLaren, that's fine, but they're going to have to buy out his contract. And it felt to me like that was all that was a power play of, they can write us a check for $5 million, $2 million, whatever it would be. And I think as time has passed, I think what actually took place, and with that assumption, by the way, under that scenario, what I anticipated was that Alex Palou probably would spend next season. My assumption is, I don't know this, but Ganassi was so adamant, and one Ganassi official was so adamant to me that, hey, Alex Palou is under contract for 2023, period, with the team. He is signed with the team. He is under contract. My assumption is, Derek, that contract probably says, so long as he is an IndyCar driver, he is under contract in the property of Chip Ganassi. I think at that point, what I assumed was that Zach Brown and McLaren was basically saying one of two things. Either, you know what, we're just going to put this out there and we'll buy him out. We'll cut a check and we'll just take him. Or the other was that he would run, like, say, because you notice with Felix Rosenqvist, who was assumed was going to be in the Formula E series for them, and that Palou was car number 3 for the IndyCar series. They haven't confirmed where Rosenqvist is going. So at that point, I thought, you know what? The other scenario is that McLaren says, you know what? Palou is going to test our Formula One car for us. He's going to run the Formula E series, and Rosenqvist is going to be our third car in the IndyCar series next year. And therefore, he's not breaching contract at all. Because if he's under contract to drive IndyCar for Chip Ganassi, fine. He just won't drive IndyCar for the year. And then at that point, the contract opens up and they can put him wherever they want. But as more time has gone on, Derek, what I think is the case, and Nathan Brown had a good article about this in the Indy Star, I think what happened, quite frankly, I don't know this, but in connecting dots, I think it's entirely possible of this. I think Alex Palou hitched his wagon to a marketing and business team that probably is very good at what they do, but doesn't have a lot of experience in terms of the contractual dealings with IndyCar. And I think they misread the fine print. I know that sounds really crazy. I know that sounds pretty unbelievable. And I know it sounds almost basically so elementary that there's no way it can be that simple. But while we sit there and grasp at the algebraic equations that led to this storyline, I think it may just be that 2 + 2 = 4, and somebody else thought that it was 2 + 2 = 5. I think that's entirely possible. And if that's the case, then Alex Palou's in a pickle, and his business. I don't know that. I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus or say anybody is 100% culpable, but I think that is a possibility now.
You know, it's an interesting point that you bring up about Alex Palou testing in Formula E next year and then running IndyCar, because I've thought the same thing. That can he do? My question is, can he? And I don't know if you'll be able to answer this. Can he do both, or is that just too much scheduling?
Yeah, I think he can. I mean, well, I think that it would be testing in a Formula One car on the dates when Formula E, he didn't have to be in the car. I mean, I think that's what they would do. I can tell you this, though. If the one thing that he would miss would certainly be the Indianapolis 500. If Arrow McLaren SP or simply McLaren wants Alex Palou within their property in 2023, then that is coming at the cost of him running an IndyCar event, unless there's a buyout. If he is contractually bound to Chip Ganassi, I'm assuming that contract says so long as he runs an IndyCar event, it has to be in a Chip Ganassi car in 2023, meaning the Indianapolis 500, for example. He wouldn't be able to do a one-off because that's an IndyCar event. So that would be my assumption, is that they can put him, Derek, wherever they want. I mean, if they said, listen, we're going to enter into the arena of Sri Lankan tricycle racing for the year, sure, great. Enter a team, paint a tricycle papaya orange and send them out there. They can do that. I'm assuming. But if it is an IndyCar sanctioned event and an IndyCar vehicle, he cannot be in it unless it's for Chip Ganassi in 2023. That much we know. That much we know is that, and I was surprised that there was, that Zach Brown came out and said, I didn't actually look at his Ganassi contract. I assume because his management company said that he is available, that he is. There might be a hitch there. That remains to be seen.
And that was something else. I was speaking with some people today, one person that listens to you on a regular basis. And I brought up the fact that what if his contract wasn't read, as you said, that fine print, and they didn't see that team option that Chip Ganassi had, that not only did Chip Ganassi sign, but Alex Palou signed, a few years ago. They didn't see that. And, they've given Alex, bad information because no one's seen it at the time. That's a good possibility as well.
I will tell you this. I guess I can say this now. It's not a place that I'm employed anymore. In a past life of mine, in a past job, I had a contract that was a 2-year contract with a 3rd-year employer option, meaning that after 2 years, my employer could come and decide whether or not they wanted to make that contract a 3-year instead of a 2-year contract. I signed it. I was under agreement to it. And about 3 months into the first year of the contract, they came to me and said, we can tell you right now, we're going to pick up your 3rd-year option. Okay, great. I mean, the good news is then that means I have job security now. I'm under a contract for 3 years instead of 2. And they came to me and said, so we're going to go ahead and revise the contract for you to sign. And I said, I already signed it. I signed a 2-year deal. You are simply changing the terminology at the bottom of the contract to make it a 3-year deal. Yeah, but the way that corporate likes to do it is to go ahead and have you sign altogether a new document. So they sent it over to me. I sent it to my attorney and said, can you look at this? And he said, everything on here is the exact same. Do you want me to change anything? If you want any changes to your contract, we might as well do it now. So I changed the length of the buyout, the severance buyout on the contract in the event that the contract was not upheld. And I sent it back to them, signed, and they signed it. So whether or not they looked over it and knew that they just agreed to a changed term that I signed, I don't know. But I know that the contract, from the financial standpoint, there ended up having to be a buyout on the contract, and they had to give me a greater amount than what they had originally agreed to because I had that changed, and they signed and agreed to that. Is it possible that somewhere along the way, Alex Palou had changes put into the contract that Ganassi signed off and agreed to during that exercise of an option that they were unaware that were made by his business team? I can't rule that out. I've done it. I don't know that. And that's maybe way, way, way esoterically inside baseball to say, but I think anything is a possibility. Anything is a possibility.
Yeah, it'll definitely interesting to hear one day if that ever comes out, what aspired. in that short little time frame there a few weeks ago. Finishing up Toronto,
Mhm.
I heard that you had a interesting plane ride on the way home from Toronto.
I was lucky. I did. It was fun. I was a late addition to Toronto. I wasn't initially supposed to go there. I drove with Michael Young, my coworker, on the way to Toronto, which was cool, and would have normally had no problem at all driving back because of the fact that we were such late additions to the roster. The commercial flights were pretty outrageous. So I didn't have a problem with that, except for that I do a morning show. I had some things work-wise that I had to be back for. I couldn't run the risk of getting held up. I couldn't run the risk of getting back at 4 a.m. and having to be up at 6. So I had a very busy day on Monday. So I sought several different ways to find out if I could buy a seat on one of the charters to come home. And it turned out that Graham Rahal had an open seat on a plane that he had, secured for himself, his father, Bobby Rahal, and Jack Harvey. And then I was the not fitting at all fourth wheel, if you will. But it was cool. They were great guys. We had fun. We had good conversation. I actually read a little bit and did some stuff while they talked business. I didn't want to interfere with that. I mean, listen, they were kind enough to bring me along. So I knew that I had to respect some of the boundaries that come with it and not necessarily listen in to some of the business discussions that were taking place and things they were, debriefing about the race. I respect that. I got a ton of respect for, one of the things I thought was really interesting is that Bobby Rahal and Graham Rahal at one point did talk about, just the team in general. And Graham is very, from a business standpoint, Graham is very on his own 2 feet. I mean, he talked about his own business. He was telling his dad about the Rahal Performance business that he runs in terms of car performances and his independent businesses that he has started. And, his dad was fascinated by listening to it. But anybody that thinks that Bobby Rahal just handed the keys to Graham Rahal has got a long time coming because he's a sharp guy. And it was fascinating to listen to those two talk about those sorts of things. Jack Harvey and I were just kind of sitting there like, yeah, man, you want to talk about Benny Hill or something? Because they're way over our head at this point, right? But it was fun. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was definitely nice to see Graham get a top 5. The way that whole team as a whole has been struggling all year. Glad to see that he was able to get out of Toronto with a top 5. Also, too, I was just asked to ask you about a customs agent that you maybe had a run-in with in Toronto as well.
I wouldn't say run-in. He was a nice guy, but it was funny. Jack Harvey shared this story with me this morning on a radio show. So when we were flying back from Toronto, we stopped in Detroit because we had to stop there, when you fly commercially or even charter, typically you go through customs in the country that you're leaving. They have American border agents there, and you go through the customs there, and then you just fly directly into Indy or whatever, and you're good to go. That's what's happened for me in the past when we've chartered. But for this particular flight, we were flying along, and we thought we were going to an area of Michigan where Bobby Rahal was going on vacation. And, we had the windows down and whatnot. And then all of a sudden we land and they come on and like, you guys need to get off the plane real quick. I'm like, okay. And so Bobby Rahal's like ready to go. He's like, all right, guys. And they're like, well, like, where are we? I'm like, you're in Detroit. Well, what are we doing in Detroit? We're supposed to stop in Detroit. And they said, well, you got to go through customs and then we'll go on. Okay, no problem. So this customs agent comes out and Jack Harvey, we all hand him our passport, and Jack Harvey hands him his passport and his visa, his work visa, because obviously he's a British citizen. Mm-hmm. So his work visa says what he does for a living. Obviously, motorsport race car driver, whatever. So the border agent's gone for 5-10 minutes, comes back, and we're all standing there. And he's looking at the things. Okay, Graham Rahal. Okay, that's this guy, Bob Rahal. Or here you go, Query. Okay. So he looks at Jack Harvey and he says, "Does this say that you're a race car driver?" Jack Harvey's like, "Yeah, I'm a race car driver." And the guy goes, "Have you ever heard of the Indy 500?" And Jack Harvey's like, "Yeah, no, I've been in it, Nate. Yeah, And he's like, "You've been in it? Have you won it?" Jack Harvey's like, "No, I a couple years ago I was leading late in the race, but had a fuel issue or whatever, and had to come in. But we keep trying. This year was my third or whatever." And the guy's like, "Man, I'll tell you what. Like, I'm gonna pull for you from now on, because just to be able to say that I would have met an Indy 500 winner just be awesome, absolutely awesome." And Jack Harvey's like, yeah, thanks, mate. So the guy turns around and is walking away, like incredulously, like optimistically saying to himself, like, Indianapolis 500, that guy runs the Indy 500. And someday I might be able to say that I dealt with a guy that won the Indy 500. Man, that'd be cool. And he's just saying it as he walks around. And we're just looking around, and I'm like, and Bobby Rahal's just like, you guys ready to get on the plane to go? I'm like, all right. So we just walked on the plane, went off, and dropped Bobby Rahal off where he was going on vacation. And then they got me home by like 9 o'clock. It was, I'll forever be grateful to Graham. It was a lot of fun, but I thought, man, that poor guy has no idea. He just checked in the 86 Indy 500 winner. Doesn't even know it. But it was cool, though. It was a fun trip, and I'll always be grateful for those guys bailing me out.
Well, yeah, good to see that you got back at 9 p.m. instead of 4 a.m.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. When you do
All
morning
right,
radio, brother, you got to get home as early as you can.
Yeah, and I have to correct the record. I was corrected by my coworker. Your current co-host in the morning is Kevin Lee, not Derik Schultz. I have to correct
Kevin Bowen.
there.
Well, okay. I do a show. You're not wrong, Derek, because I do a show with Derik Schultz on ISC Sports Network. I do a podcast that airs on video once a week. And then, so we do that on Mondays. And then I do the morning show on 93.5, 107.5, The Fan in Indy with Kevin Bowen, who was a Colts writer primarily, worked for the Colts before he moved over and became basically the chief writer for 107.5thefan.com.
No, can't fault him for that. Jake, before you go, we do need to preview Iowa. Only doubleheader on the race schedule this year. Obviously, been a couple of years since the IndyCar has stopped at Iowa. Give us a little bit of insight, a couple of things that fans should be looking and watching for this weekend.
Well, I think one of the real keys is, you got to make sure that your car's good in traffic. I mean, qualifying position is probably, I think for a lot of tracks, you want to qualify well because over the course of the race, it's hard to make up spots. I think for Iowa, where you qualify is probably not near as important as how you qualify your car. And by that, I mean how close your car, how much speed you can find out of your car in traffic, because you're in traffic basically the entire time. 7/8 of a mile. I mean, it's basically a bull ring, right? So, you can pull away. I mean, I've seen Joseph Newgarden, the first year that he won there for Red Carpenter Racing. I mean, he just ran away with it. But even when you do that, you don't get many laps of clean track in front of you before you're right back into lap traffic again and putting people a lap down because you're turning basically nearly 3 laps a minute. So that's important. The team that's going to be able to set their car up and have the right feel and the right balance in that is important. But the other important thing is to keep it clean because you got to race the next night. I mean, we're talking about on Saturday, you got to turn around and race again on Sunday. So it's going to be hot. Physical conditioning comes into play. With that, mental fatigue comes into play. And so there are a lot of curveballs that go into this race. But I think what it's going to come down to is probably as much as any racetrack that we go to, the combination of driver, strategist, and engineer. An engineer to this race may be as big as any because you're constantly trying to find that sweet spot where your car feels okay and you're comfortable going on the high line. There's a bump in turn 2 at Iowa. When they go, it's where the tunnel is. It can get bumpy. That can irritate the balance of your car. So there are a lot of curveballs that come into play. But listen, Hy-Vee's done an unbelievable job as the sponsor. I haven't been there yet, obviously, but I know they've got a ton of activity going on. They got 4 different concerts going on. They're going to put a grocery store at the track itself. They're going to deliver groceries to your campsite if you're camping there. Hy-Vee decided to grow their brand name outside the state of Iowa and let people know who they are for places like Indianapolis, where they're moving now with a store in Zionsville. And they selected IndyCar as the platform to get their name out there. And I think race fans are going to be thrilled they did.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. All I've seen on social media, what Hy-Vee has done by building their brand specifically to IndyCar is just been absolutely phenomenal. So I think you're absolutely right there. Jake, I know we got to let you go. Obviously, you got a busy few days ahead of you. For people that don't already follow you on social media, shame on them if they don't. Where can they find you at?
At Jake Query, that's Jake is my first name, Query. I think you actually have it scrolling like right here below me. In just a second, you're going to see it. At Jake Query, Jakequery, and then also our morning show, 93.5, 107.5 The Fan. That can be heard obviously on TuneIn Radio and things like that. But the YouTube channel is both Kevin and Query, or just The Fan, 107.5 The Fan. That's the easiest thing to remember. 107.5 The Fan. If you want to listen to it, we'd be happy to have you.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, go check him out. Go check out the work that he does. It is absolutely off the charts. But Jake, again, huge thank you for carving some time out of
My
your
pleasure,
busy
man.
schedule to join us. And I will see you at IMS at the end of the week, or end of the month, and then we'll be in Nashville as well. So we'll have to connect there as well.
Derik, I'm going to give you a little secret here, but don't tell anybody, okay?
Okay.
I would make time for you even if I was, but I'm not really that busy. Only in the morning time, right? Morning time and race weekends. Other than that, man, I'm happy to do it anytime.
Yeah, but you know what? You got a family to take care of too, so that takes up all your time when you're not.
I got a girlfriend. I got a girlfriend and 2 dogs.
See, right? Look at see, you're a dog guy. What can you say?
Surprised you didn't hear Joey and Kobe upstairs running around barking. But I'll go play with them now.
Honestly, didn't hear a sound, but
that's good. I like that.
Jake, again, huge thank you for joining us, and we'll talk down the road.
All right, my man, be good.
Yeah, you too. That was Jake Query. Go check him out on social media and go check out the race on Saturday and Sunday. He'll be calling him, Mark James, and the rest of the crew there on the IndyCar Radio Network. For anyone that is paying attention to the time, everybody knows what time it is. You want to win some scratch this weekend? Well, I have the guy for you. Mike of BetIndyCar is joining us as always. Mike, first and foremost, as always, a huge thank you for carving some time out of your day as well to join us. And I know everyone is sitting on edge to know how you did last week.
Last week we won money, so me and hopefully we paid for your Peacock subscription last week. We hit a winner with Dixon. Last week kind of worked out. I would have made more money if Herta win, but I'm not going to look a gift horse in the mouth, and I'll take profitable week. The Graham Rahal top 5 was a great bet that came in. Had the entire top 3 and had a Felix, a couple matchups as well, and had Dixon at 5.5, 6 to 1 winner. Depending on where you got it. So only had 2 to win bets last week, and they were for Herta and Dixon. And Dixon hit it, and still had the Herta top 3 come in. So yeah, last week was great. We paid for those Peacock subscriptions going forward. So hopefully everybody listened and followed along. There were a lot of tickets that we saw on Twitter, which was great. I know one guy listened to us and listened to Tony and I on the Twitter Spaces before the race, and put a bet on Dixon. And made a ton of money. So that's awesome to see. And hopefully it got a couple more fans. It's all about growing the sport and getting more engagement around IndyCar and IndyCar betting.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I know we talked about how tough it was, handicapping Toronto with not being there for the last couple of years, only having a handful of drivers, having any type of experience there at all. And one that we talked about that did have experience, but was in kind of a funk. As you said, the aforementioned Scott Dixon, drought, but Dixon was able to pull it out. I know how excited you were about that, but you did talk about the run that Graham Rahal had. That had to be exciting, seeing him finish in the top 5.
Yeah, look, I thought we nailed it on our handicap. We talked about wanting to bet the veterans at the track. We talked about the fact that qualifying was going to matter. It wasn't going to be you couldn't run through the field like you did in Mid-Ohio or some of the open road courses. It was going to be tough to pass. It was going to be sort of like St. Pete, and it played out just like we thought. So when the handicap hits like that, then normally we're going to make some money. So it was fun. It was a fun race to bet. It was a fun race to watch, it turned out to be a profitable one.
Yeah, it absolutely was, and I was able I listened for a little bit, as you've seen in your spaces right before the race on Sunday, and then I listened to a little bit before coming on tonight. But moving to the double weekend this weekend in Iowa, I know this has to be a little bit tougher, obviously, as Toronto was as well, with the IndyCar not being at Iowa since 2020. So again, another just a handful of drivers have a little bit of experience. But I thought Tony asked an interesting question in Spaces, talking about, are you paying more attention to the first race on Saturday, or are you putting all of your allotted bankroll into Sunday?
Yeah. So my response to that is, I'm gonna do my best to follow my own advice, but the way that I have found this to work in the past, we've had dual in Detroit, we've had dual Iowa races. What I think the most optimal thing to do, and the way I like to play it, is I'd like to say, like, if let's say your bankroll is $100 a race, just whatever number you have per race that you put out there for your bankroll. I'd actually take half of what you were going to put in the first race and dump it all into the second race. So make the second race, have, almost 150% of your bankroll and the other 50% from the two races just on the first race. And then look, you pay attention, you watch the race. If you're a fan, the sportsbooks aren't watching these races. I'm fairly confident in saying that we can take advantage of this qualifying format. You just had Jake on. We can watch the cars who are good in traffic. The races are about at the same time. They're close to the same length. So there are some factors there. Maybe we can see, a guy that's maybe coming on at the end of the race and take advantage of that in the second race. So the plan is going to be to save more money for the second race and kind of roll some of the extra bankroll to the second race, take it easy the first race a little bit, pick and choose the bets I want to make, but to watch, pay attention to practice, really pay attention to what happens in that first race. And then see, usually in these duels, you get some really good betting numbers, and the sportsbooks make some mistakes with matchups and betting lines for sure.
Now, from the research aspect, I know we talked about how tough it was for you with Toronto having such limited data. Now, is that the same? Are you finding the same thing here with Iowa, with obviously, being on a 2-year hiatus from the Iowa Speedway? Are you finding the same roadblocks research-wise as you did with Toronto?
So yes and no. So the cool thing about IndyCar, right, we race on 3 different types of tracks: road, street, oval. Well, when it comes to betting, and the betting is 3 different types of betting, honestly. The road and street, fairly similar, but in oval betting, qualifying doesn't matter. When you're betting IndyCar, we're doing everything we can to try to find who's going to qualify well before, and bet them before qualifications and get a really good number. In oval, we saw a winner come from last to first. If you look at the results, it doesn't really matter where you start in this race. If you slip up in qualifying, it's not the end of the world, which means that you can bet a lot of these long shots. You can bet some big numbers. This is where, oval betting is where you're going to find your 20-1, your 30-1, maybe even your 50-1 winners in IndyCar. Whereas you're not going to, most of the time in street courses, if you're betting after qualifications, every guy in the top 10 is going to be under 10-1 for the most part, unless it's something weird. And most times, most of the times, 90-something% of the races are going to come from somewhere in the top 6, top 8 drivers, depending on the race and if there's, fuel strategies involved. But so the oval betting is a little bit different animal. So you're going to have some big numbers. You're going to bet it a little bit differently. Yeah, you do. The handicap, the research, the yes part is the research is there. Like I've already made a bet. I had planned to make this bet months ago. Joseph has got my 4-1 money right off the bat. I feel pretty good in that saying. I feel like he's got a better than a 4-1 chance to win both these races, or at least one of these races. So, that may be my only to win ticket going in to the first race. We'll see what kind of matchups and top 5s and top 3s we get. But the rest of the bets are going to be, mostly the long shots and the bigger numbers. Is I'm going to try to get something big this weekend and try to find those guys that are going to come in the top 5 that are, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-1.
I did notice when you tweeted out earlier today, the first lines that came out, no surprise that Joseph Newgarden was at the top of that list.
Yeah, the guy's dominated this track. I mean, I don't even know. I can't quote this. It's like 100+ laps led, and he ran away with it that one year. He's always in the top. I expect him. He knows how to drive this track. It's all about, saving your tires, saving the fuel. And you notice this is another track where the veterans rule as well. Like I do plan on trying to pick on some of the rookies, and especially some of I think it makes a difference, the short ovals versus the super speedways. I may pick on Jimmy Johnson again this week. Like I think, while I think his NASCAR prowess and history helped him on the Texases and the Indianapolis 500, the super speedway tracks of the world. This is going to be a different ball game being in an IndyCar on a short track. And, I could be wrong there. That one, I'm 50-50. I'm going to wait and see how he does in practice. But, I'm going to be picking on Grosjean. I'm going to be picking on Caleb Millot and, Malukas and Devlin and those guys for sure. If you notice the top of the leaderboards from the 2 prior races the 2 years ago, the Iowa doubleheader, it's Pagano, it's Will, it's Scott. Scott's got a million top 3s here. I'll be looking to grab his top 3, top 5 number, especially if it's plus money. Again, he's he's got a ton of second place finishes. So it's your veterans, it's your guys that know how to save tires, know when to push, know when not to push, know how to stretch the fuel windows out. So, those are the guys that I'll be looking to target this week.
Yeah, we're as always. Just seems like we are definitely on the same page, because also I do like Newgarden in fantasy, Scott Dixon and Will Power as well. That is some of the people that I actually definitely favor this weekend. I do have a question from a listener though, and I was going to get to this anyway. But who would be a good long shot dark horse to bet on?
Yeah, so the guys at Burnout Bets, Tony and even some other people on Twitter have been trying to get me to bet Connor Daly for races upon races, and I'm just not seeing it. It may be time to take the leap. He's 66-1 in some books. I've seen him a little higher in other places. His top 5 is actually what I like at 7-1. His podium I think was 15-1. So he's the guy that caught my eye. He got a pole here. He needs to get better during the race, managing traffic, managing tires. He can turn a fast lap, that's for darn sure, when he's out there qualifying. So I expect him to qualify well. We'll see, how he does in a different car, in a Carpenter car. The other one was Rahal. I talked about this on the Twitter Spaces. He's at 33-1. That's a lot higher than he was the last race. He's got some top 5s here. Maybe some momentum coming off the last race, and Rahal's got a lot into this race. The only reason this track is, I believe, on the schedule is because of Rahal and Hy-Vee and the ties there and how that all worked out. So you want to go real crazy, you can grab Harvey. I know he's been miserable this year, but he's been miserable on the street and road courses. He didn't do too bad. He's got some decent finishes and some decent placement points here. So I saw Harvey at 150-1, 201. That might be a couple bucks, $5 or less, at that kind of number. But Rahal, Daly, those are the ones, the longer shots that caught my eye. I've seen Pagano different places at 20-1, 18-1. He came here from last to first in a Penske car. I think that makes it that's vastly important. The engineering, the aeroscreen, he's using the same information that Newgarden's using. So that's a little short. He's getting a little bump for his history. But yeah, those longer numbers are Rahal and Connor got my eye.
Yeah, I definitely like your call there on Rahal. I'm actually in the camp of a sleeper. All 3 of the Rahal cars, Graham, Christian Lundgaard, and Jack Harvey. I definitely like them on the fantasy side. And then you touched on Simon Pagano. I like the Meyer Shank for fantasy purposes this weekend as well. Now, when it comes to Connor Daly, for some reason I just have this feeling, and I don't know what it is, that I'm fading our Ed Carpenter cars this weekend. I don't know. I can't quite put my finger on it, but I just don't, like I said, until Daly can show me some improvement, I'm going to have to disagree with Tony strongly.
Yeah. I like Connor Daly. I think he's good for the sport. But when it comes to racing and results, he's a guy that I usually do fade. I don't bet on. If there's ever a race or a type of race, the Indy 500 is one where he's obviously, spend some time up front. He does better on the ovals. He's definitely a better oval racer, I think, than a road course specialist. And he's never had good car. He's never had the engineering and the money behind him. But T5, I don't think is totally unrealistic for him in one of these races. It's a very small bet, if anything. But if there was ever a race for me to think about it, I'll see how. I am curious to see how the Carpenter cars practice tomorrow, and I don't think their numbers will move too much just based on practice times. But if they come off fast and they're sitting in the top 5 in practice, then it might be worth putting a couple bucks on them.
Yeah, definitely going to be worth the watch this weekend with a doubleheader for sure. Mike, what's the rest of your schedule for this weekend going to look like? People be looking at your Twitter for your latest lines, and then I know you and Tony at Burnout Sports do a Twitter Spaces. Are you going to be doing one for Saturday and Sunday, or what's the schedule yet, or is that yet to be determined?
Yeah, well, Tony's at the race, so I guess it depends on how many cocktails Tony's had, and if he's if Tim McGraw stops singing. I wish I was out there. It sounds like while it's going to be hot, I don't mind the heat. It looks like it's going to be a ton of fun. If the only thing I was going to say they're missing, Iowa is a legal state for sports betting. They need the need the Hy-Vee Caesar Sportsbook out there in the campsite. Like, I'd be all about going there for that. Maybe next year we can once we get this betting thing going even more, we can get the sports book out there. They seem to have everything else. They got the grocery store. They got all the decks. So we just need a sports book. So we're going to try to do some spaces. Keep an eye. We'll definitely probably do one Sunday, Saturday. It depends on Tony's schedule. I'll try to get on there. I'm not there, so I'm free. So and they'll be tweeting out as we see matchups and bets, and I'll tweet the card for both races on Twitter. And then if anybody's got questions, they can just shoot them my way on Twitter. I keep an eye on it, and I'd be happy to answer those questions. But right now, just one thing before we go, we did talk about some bets on the spaces that we like. There's one bet out there that we think that's very interesting, and it's Caesars has got winning manufacturer. And I don't know if you saw that, but without me even telling you, who do you think is the favorite winning manufacturer, Chevy or Honda?
Well, I can tell you that I did not see it, so I'm guessing. Obviously, I got a 50-50 chance at this. I'm gonna say Chevy.
So Honda, they got listed as the favorite. Numbers matter, right? So I always tell you guys, like, betting is all about numbers sometimes. It's a little bit of, there's the drivers involved, but you got to get the best number. It's about getting the right kind of number if you want to be, make money long term. And so it's Honda's the favorite at -135, and Chevy's actually plus money. Not a lot. It's almost even money, just plus 105. But to me, that's backwards. I think Chevy should be the favorite, and I think that's a mistake on their part. So I think that's a really good number and something I would grab. I mean, like I said, the only car, I worry, Dixon is obviously a Honda, but not only, do you get Joseph with the Chevy, you get the Carpenter cars, you get Pato, who obviously has been fast here before. He's another guy that's at the top of the odds board. Most of the top of the odds board is scattered with Chevys. You get Power, obviously, you get the whole Penske crew. So the Ray Hall callers, there's a couple of good Honda cars in the mix. I'm not really worried about Palou. I'm not really worried about Herta. I don't, Andretti doesn't have great history at these tracks. So, I like the Chevy bet. And I'm surprised it's plus money. I think it should be the other way around. So that's something that caught my eye. If it's available to you, I know Caesars is in Iowa for people that are out there that, when you're out there at the race, there's going to be 35,000 people. Sign up on their app. I think you can get they're doing you can take advantage of promotions out there, and you can make some bets and enjoy the race.
Yeah, definitely, Mike. Always good stuff, and as he said, if you can take advantage of that bet there between the manufacturers, because I definitely like where Mike's head is at when it comes to that. But again, huge thank you for joining us as always. For people that don't already follow you on social media, where can they find you at to win some scratch this weekend and beyond?
Yeah, at Indy_bet is where I'm going to be at on Twitter, and you guys can get me there, and I'll try to pump out as much information. It's going to stay pretty much betting related to IndyCar is what I stay in my lane with. So that's where you can find me, and happy to reach out.
Yeah, absolutely. Good stuff. Always putting out good information. Always keeping track of what you're putting out on Twitter. Unfortunately, Mike, Caesars isn't going to put up how many cocktails Tony's going to have this weekend and over under, will they?
No, there wasn't over under on how many times I was going to tell people to bet Joseph. I think I stayed under, even though I said take the over. Like I said, Joseph, if you're a person that's just going to make one bet, just bet Joseph to win each race and root it on, is what I would probably tell you to do. Unless we see something crazy in the first race or in qualifying and they just come out really slow or something weird's going on. The guy dominates here. He really, in my opinion, should have been honestly 2-1, 3-1. I think he wins one out of every three races there that we've ever had there. He's ever had in the air. So I think that's a good place. And if he didn't win, his teammate won. That probably had his package. That's probably what I would do. But yeah, we'll see. Well, hopefully we'll get some Twitter spaces. I might have a couple cocktails in me Saturday by the time the race comes through. So that might be a fun one. We might be we're throwing some cash around.
Sounds good. Again, a huge thank you for carving time out of your busy schedule to join us. Definitely look forward to having you on Thursday nights, and we'll do this again in about a week or so, seeing how much money you rake in this weekend that to spend at the road course next weekend.
Yeah, good luck, everybody.
Yep, thank you. Again, huge thank you to Mike for joining us as always. Don't forget to go check him out on social media. If you want to be in the business of winning some money, some cash this weekend, some scratch, as the kids like to say, then definitely go check him out on social media and follow what bets he puts out there for sure. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that wraps it up for another episode of the Push to Pass podcast. Huge thank you to everyone that tuned in live, and that for people that will tune in and watch this replay for the days and weeks to come. Also, huge thank you to both Jake Query of IndyCar Radio Network for joining us. If you can't watch the race this weekend or races this weekend, make sure you check them out on IndyCar Radio Network. And then, as always, huge thank you to Mike from BetIndyCar on Twitter at Indy_bet. Go check that out. Go give that a follow. So, ladies and gentlemen, again, that does it for this week's episode. Huge thank you for everyone that is tuning in and watching, or that will tune in. That does it, and we will see you at the next show.